Welcome back to How I Fixed World of Warcraft for TTRPG. We are finally back in the main series. It has been a while because things have been coming up, either new things that have been revealed on the PTR, things that we were either happy about or unhappy about, or not on the PTR, or the housing news, which was disappointing after all the very promising things that we have seen about it. But if this is your first video, this is how I rebooted the world of Azeroth and beyond for a tabletop RPG campaign I'm running on Discord with a couple of friends. One of my primary goals was to rebuild things to make it a more believable world, but to also make it serve a TTRPG better, as well as the specific needs of my players. And I have gone through majority of the Eastern Kingdoms, going through all the many little changes I have done and things that I have kept unchanged. And one of the last major things that were really left for us, two major things that are left for us in the continent is Stormwind and the Gurubashi, the jungle trolls, which are both some pretty major topics in World of Warcraft, which cannot be completely avoided. And I don't know if many people will still want to watch this, will still care about finishing everything, but I promise you there will be some really cool, still graphical things that I have done for the campaign when we were there. So, stay tuned. Here's the thing about Stormwind. There was always a big discontinuity. It's not the lack of continuity. It felt like a lack of continuity, even if it was totally explainable, between Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft. Because in Warcraft 3, it's implied the Eastern Kingdoms were like completely destroyed. It doesn't say it explicitly, but whenever, after everyone leaves, or the main characters leave the Eastern Kingdoms, every time it shoots us back to the Eastern Kingdoms, we see it in complete ruins, like demons and undead rampaging everywhere, and that's all we see of it. So while it doesn't say it explicitly, it kind of leaves us with this implication that everything there is completely destroyed. We see bands, groups in Kalimdor that are named after the different human kingdoms, which, kind of leaves that implication that everyone had to leave because everything there is destroyed. But then we get to World of Warcraft, and suddenly, Stormwind is perfectly fine. Stormwind is even better than it was the last time we have seen it, because it's been completely rebuilt after the ruin it has been through in the first two Warcraft games. And it's now the crowning, the leading human kingdom. It came as a bit of a disappointment to me when I first got into World of Warcraft, because I kind of expected, hoped that Theramore would be the main human capital, because the Theramore was my favorite human quote-unquote kingdom, because of all the history with Jaina and with the people I helped bring there, with people I helped build up there. And that was my favorite kingdom. That was what I would have hoped would be the human capital in World of Warcraft, but it was Stormwind. So when I was rebooting the setting for my game, I was faced with the decision: do I go for this version of the world where the Eastern Kingdoms are totally destroyed, or do I keep some of that familiarity, some of the familiar to us elements from World of Warcraft? It was a hard decision, and I wouldn't blame anyone for keeping Stormwind destroyed with everything else. In the end, I decided to keep Stormwind because there was still a lot of really cool elements from Stormwind that I thought I really could use, I really could do something cool with. So I decided to keep Stormwind and in fact, the very first thing we did in the reboot, after landing back in the rebooted universe, was a big campaign in Stormwind in Westfall to do with the Devious Brotherhood, because frankly it was one of the probably the best storylines, with some like real nuance to it. Even if it wasn't like very explicit about the nuance, you see quite a lot of the political nuance in those Devious storylines, because of course it's all Onyxia manipulating people, but you see like real political tension between like the stonemasons that the nobles didn't want to pay. And in real life, you don't even need an evil dragon to manipulate people to do that. Like, it happens in real life all the time. So it's really relatable to think of the Devious Brotherhood as these people who were harmed, who were wronged, who are now lashing out. And of course they are going too far, and that was also a big element of the story that we have seen when we went there. But the goal after that was to reform the Devious Brotherhood, to give them an opportunity to do something better. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's get you a very brief introduction to the story that we had there. When we first landed in the new universe, we came out above Stormwind, because it was, even when we were playing back in World of Warcraft, it has always been our like headcanon, our little private lore, that these stalls above Stormwind were in the Evergrowth dungeon from Warlords of Draenor, where the big Genazor comes out of. And now even in the outside of the dungeon, in the main game world, you can see those stalls and this overgrowth heading out of that portal above Stormwind. So we always had as a part of our personal canon that those stalls were bought by our company, and thus we were organizing our shop and everything. So when we first landed in the new rebooted world, that's where we come out of. Well, that shop would be, of course, in the rebooted world, those events from Draenor didn't happen yet, so we just set up our stalls anew. So we end up coming out, we end up in Stormwind. So we have to come out and scan the area, look around the area, see what has changed, what hasn't changed. And we end up going into the Stormwind Keep and asking people there. And we end up stumbling into Bolvar for Dragon and Lady Katrana Prestor. And after talking to them, we of course know, because we came from the future that got destroyed, we know that Katrana Prestor is in fact Onyxia, but we can't exactly tell them, because we don't care about breaking the timeline, because that's like how the point of the game, that we can change the future, we can change the things that have gone wrong. But if we just come out and say, guys, this is Onyxia, like, nobody's going to believe us, and then Onyxia is going to want to kill us. So we had to be a little more careful with that. We end up being sent to Westfall to investigate the Devious Brotherhood activity. And after a long story that I will not go into all the details in there, we end up learning more about the Devious, we end up learning more about Van Cleef himself. And in the end, we try to sneak into the Dead Mines, and we find they are mostly abandoned. There are very few people in the Dead Mines when we get there. We did defeat like a few of the bosses from the classic dungeon. But then, when we get to the main cove, there is no ship there. In fact, the gate leading out into the sea is open, and the ship is already gone. And it's heading out to assault Stormwind. Like, come on. Haven't we all, maybe not all of us, but a lot of people have imagined that ship actually going out, actually doing something with that ship. And in my game, I had the opportunity to actually do it. And you should be seeing the few pictures I made via some extra, tools some pictures I made of the Juggernaut from the DPS actually assaulting Stormwind. And because Edwin Van Cleef is going too far, we had to actually go and stop him. We have to teleport back to Stormwind, and we fight the DPS, we fight Edwin Van Cleef on the ship assaulting the Stormwind harbor. And after all of that is said and done, we actually tell Bolvar about Onyxia. We set him on the path to do something about it while we continue our adventures elsewhere around the world. And also, we spend a lot of time, mostly off screen, but a lot of our employees, a lot of our minions spend a lot of time in Westfall rebuilding Westfall, because Stormwind is distracted, Stormwind is preoccupied with all the other stuff, so we invest a lot of money into rebuilding Westfall, so it isn't that dried out husk, that dried out ruin, and so that the people in Westfall don't feel that need to lash out against the central government, because they are getting their needs met with our help. And the company sees it, we work for, sees it as an investment, because then Westfall will owe a lot to us. And now we still have a lot of that investment, we still have a lot of facilities that we helped build, so Westfall really owes a lot to us, and it's of course part of the Kingdom of Stormwind. It's really dependent on us in many ways, and we like it that way, that there is some section of the little section of the world out there that depends on a lot for us. And we, of course, use the remains of the DPS and try to reform them, and they become a little bit of a vigilante group. It was always a little bit of my headcanon for the DPS, and that they become this vigilante group that there's a little bit of a vigilante justice, not quite superhero-like, but, sneaking around the city and killing corrupt nobles and stuff like that. So that's the majority of what we have done with Stormwind. The other major part of that part of the world is the Gurubashi, the jungle trolls, Zul'gurub and all of that. And admittedly, we haven't done a lot with that, because our adventures just took us elsewhere. However, Hakar did come up once, and he will probably come up soon again, because of the other tie-in stuff that we are doing right now. Hakar, the Soul Flayer, not the Houndmaster, because we have to have two Hakars. Hakar, the Soul Flayer, is tied once again to the Emerald Nightmare. It wasn't ever explicitly said back in vanilla, but it has always been implied that Hakar is somehow tied to the old gods, to the Emerald Nightmare. That's what all these elements in vanilla were supposed to tie together. And then it just wasn't ever explicitly said. We were just jumping from one thing to another. So we never learned what was the deal, why all of these things happened at once. And Hakar was supposed to be connected to the old gods, the Emerald Nightmare. That's what he was also called the Faceless One. And in our setting, he could actually be connected to all of that. We haven't done a lot of that with that yet, but we will return to that soon, and we will deal with Hakar the Soul Flayer, and we will deal with the whole Old Gods and Emerald Nightmare plotline left partially unsolved in vanilla. We haven't done a lot with the Jungle Trolls either, because, like I said, adventures just took us elsewhere, but Stranglethorn Vale will not look the same way it does in World of Warcraft, because in WoW, majority of Stranglethorn is just ruins and trolls just skulking in the ruins. Like, who lives like that? Why would they live like that in those ruins, in those jungles? In my setting, the jungle trolls have actual cities there in the jungle, like Zul'Kunda isn't just a big empty ruin. No, not empty. There's just a big ruin with people just skulking around in the empty sheds. It's an actual troll city connected to Zul'gurub, and all the other small ruins, the WoW ruins, are actual cities that are connected to each other and making this whole big network that actually cooperates with the sunken temple and with all the other jungle trolls. So it all makes sense as an actual threat, and it isn't just a bunch of. I don't want to use the word savages because it's politically incorrect right now, but that's how jungle trolls in WoW are represented. They're shown as these savages that can't do anything correctly and live in those ruins. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make them those quote-unquote savages. So they have an actual civilization there with a working network, with trade and not quite industry because they're still tribal, but with a working economy, sort of, that is still focused on Hakar, on the blood god, that is still focused on all of that quote-unquote evil stuff, but it's supposed to be an actual working civilization in there. What's really left in the Eastern Kingdoms? The Burning Steppes and the Searing Gorge are an element that are tied to the dwarves, and I talked a little bit briefly about it, but there are elements going on with Onyxia and Nefarian that would be take very long to explain about what's actually going on in there. That probably needs a whole separate video to explain what's happening with the Black Dragonflight. So I will probably go into that separately. But we are going into Nefarian. And we are going into Onyxia, and we're going into all that separately. And it will be resolved soon. What else is left there in the Eastern Kingdoms? The Blasted Lands are largely unchanged, still being this red blasted ruin. Kumisha the Collector is still collecting his Drenethist. So not a lot has changed there. And because of some other events, the Burning Crusade events can't really happen, so there probably won't be the big demon invasion going through the Dark Portal, which is still largely closed off, which is still largely shut down. So the Blasted Lands will probably remain this just forgotten blasted ruin in the far end of nowhere. And I think I have gone into majority of the things that I have done with the Eastern Kingdoms. There are the pirates in Booty Bay left, the goblins and the pirates in Booty Bay, but that is really a whole other topic that isn't really about the Eastern Kingdoms. There is a lot of that pirate activity in the South Seas, there are a lot of goblin activity in the South Seas, and I really need to make a goblin video where I just love the goblins in WoW. And everything about the goblins and everything I've done with the goblins in my reboot and everything about that. But there's another big topic that I should be doing separately. And I'm already rambling on for over 18 minutes, so I should really be finishing this now. And I think I have gone through everything that I needed to go through here. And maybe next time you will see me talking about the Void like I promised ages ago, or maybe we'll go into the Black Dragonflight. Let me know in the comments below, what would you like to see more, and if you would prefer talking about the Void or the Black Dragonflight and everything we're doing with them, or maybe some other topic that you would like to see elaborated on in my reboot. Anyway, this should be pretty much the ending of this video, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, I don't have a Patreon, but you can do it on my Ko-fi page linked in the video description below. Then I hope to see you next time.